Hey guys, it's Ty with Ty the Dog Guy on the Daily, and yesterday in our podcast we talked about tools, techniques, and consistency. Tools, techniques, and consistency are the only three things standing in between you and the results you want to have with your dog. Those are the three categories of mistakes that you are making right now. We're all making them, but that you're making right now that are leading to you not getting the results that you need. So yesterday we talked about tools. Today I want to talk about techniques. And so with techniques, we really need to look at two things. Do we have the correct technique, and are we doing the technique correctly? Those two things. Let me repeat. Do we have the correct technique, and are we doing the technique correctly? And so the correct technique this is a vague concept, right? Because there is no correct technique. This is kind of a trick question. Because there's not a trick question. That's a trick category, I guess you could say, because there is no correct way to train a dog. There's a million ways, and some ways might be more effective for this, might be more effective for that. This person might practice this part better, but they do this worse. So anyways, there's not a correct way to train a dog, but what there are typically are ways that are more effective. So for example, we get folks who their dogs jump on them. That's a common one. Maybe your dog does that too. And so, there's 1,000 techniques to work on getting a dog to stop jumping, but the reality is some are more effective than others. So, for example, a quick little leash correction or maybe a spray bottle when our dog jumps can often be incredibly effective, quick, humane, easy for you, easy for the dog. Yet, there's a technique that's more commonly taught, which is strange. The technique that's more commonly taught, if you're going to read a dog training book or something like that, is, when your dog jumps, you ignore him because the dog will start to realize that he doesn't get attention when he jumps, and therefore he's going to stop jumping. But the reality is, there's plenty of dogs that they're like, well, jumping by itself is fun, so I'm going to keep doing it. But that's just one example. But what I'm getting at is, in that case, a quick leash correction is demonstrably better of a technique than simply ignoring the dog. It just is. And so some techniques will be better for certain behaviors. Other techniques you might have to test around and figure out for your dog, for your scenario, for your situation, which techniques are better. And this is why it's important that you understand at its root how dogs learn and how dogs think, so that you can kind of adjust techniques as you go. But while there isn't one technique that's the best for everything, there are times when we can basically surmise that some techniques are better. And the rule of thumb is a good technique, we're going to start to see results pretty quick. Dogs aren't dumb, they can learn quick. And so if we're trying to employ a technique and we're doing the technique correctly, and that's what I'm going to talk about here in a second, and if we're doing that technique correctly and yet we're not seeing any progress within a week or 2 weeks, our technique is probably off, and so we need to readjust and reevaluate. And so like I say, if you're kind of plodding ahead and the technique just isn't getting you there, you may not have the correct technique. You may need to look and see, what you might need to try next. But then the next thing is, are we doing the techniques correctly? And this is valuable to understand, right? Because quite frequently, as trainers, we work with folks and we show them this technique and they do it wrong. Say, okay, do this with the leash, and their timing is off, or they do something with the leash that's off. And so the technique is fine, because we might demonstrate it and we get the right results. So the technique we know is fine, but the owner's doing it wrong. And so if that's the case, like I say, while the technique is okay, we need to be doing the technique correctly. What I often recommend to folks is, hey, film yourself. Have somebody film you. Have somebody critique you. Even if somebody doesn't know the training that you're doing, oftentimes if you just have somebody look at you, they'll be able to tell you, things that you just can't see that they might be able to see that you're doing wrong. And so if you have the right tool, you're using the right technique, and you're doing the technique correctly, then the only thing left is consistency. That's what I'm going to talk about tomorrow.